Following Lenin's death in 1924, the Soviet Union faced uncertain leadership. The most notable contest for power was between Leon Trotsky and Joseph Stalin. Stalin strategically consolidated his power within the Communist Party and the Soviet government, effectively outmaneuvering his political rivals and firmly established his control over the Soviet state by 1929. In that same year, Trotsky's waning influence culminated in his exile. This shift marked the beginning of a new, ruthless phase in Soviet politics. This video was originally an Armchair History TV original video, but I'm releasing it today without a sponsor to show you the quality of our content that can be found on our new and independent platform. We have over 150 other exclusive videos from content creators including ourselves, Nalegia, The Front, Brandon F., and many others, including an exclusive by Alternate History Hub, all available on Armchair History TV right now. There's also an animated podcast I started, which I'll be uploading monthly. Many of our original videos on AHTV cover topics which are either too sensitive for YouTube's monetization guidelines or too niche to succeed using YouTube's algorithm, but are finally supported by historical content enthusiasts like you. We also have a mobile app for both iOS and Android, so you can watch our content anywhere. All of our YouTube videos air early on our website and always ad, sponsorship, and censorship free. The uncensored videos specifically have an uncut label, so you can find exactly what you're missing compared to the YouTube version. I'm also really excited to announce that we're working on releasing a documentary next month on the full history of ISIS, a topic we certainly couldn't cover on YouTube given their censorship restrictions. You can support the production of this upcoming documentary by signing up today for just $1 for your first month. Use code NOCENSORSHIP for 80% off and check out our upcoming documentary this July. From the early 1930s, the Soviet Union grappled with the turmoil of forced collectivization and the resultant famine. The political elite, fearing social disorder and the potential threat of invasion, grew increasingly paranoid. Stalin, keen on preventing rebellion, began targeting any groups that had the potential to support an uprising, marking the beginning of systematic repressions. Stalin's supposed admiration for Hitler's Knight of the Long Knives, revealed by his interpreter, Valentin Berezhkov, hinted at his approval of similar tactics to deal with political opposition within the Soviet Union. Stalin's ascent to power was characterized by the strategic elimination of internal opposition within the Communist Party. A critical juncture in this process was the Ryutin affair, which involved Macmillan Ryutin and Grigory Zinoviev, both suspected to be sympathizers of Trotsky. These prominent figures were part of a key circle of anti-Stalinist old Bolsheviks who criticized Stalin's policies and ultimately called for his removal. Stalin considered this the first significant consolidation of opposition groups with an allegedly terrorist agenda, strengthening his resolve to quash any challenge to his authority. Stalin recognized the difficulty of obtaining consent for executing members for political reasons alone, yet that did not stop the purging of the party elements through other means. Between 1932 and 1936, large swaths of the Communist Party were expelled, with 1933 alone seeing 800,000 members removed after a resolution was passed by the Central Committee. A key event in this period was the assassination of Sergei Kirov on December 1, 1934. Kirov, a high-ranking and influential member of the Communist Party, was fatally shot by Leonid Nikolaev, an ex-party member with a deep grudge due to his expulsion and subsequent personal and financial struggles. The circumstances surrounding Nikolaev's ability to carry out the assassination despite a previous attempt raised questions about the possible complicity or negligence of the NKVD in facilitating the murder. Initially, the Soviet government under Stalin claimed their investigation proved that the assassination was acting on the behalf of a secret Zinovievist group, suggesting a conspiracy by political rivals within the party. Stalin's regime had continued to repress wealthy peasants and anti-communists since the late 1920s. This occurred under a campaign known as dekulakization, leading to significant unrest, with scorched earth policies from some kulak farming communities and Soviet attempts at forced collectivization, resulting in severe famines across the USSR. The most infamous of these including the Holodomor of Ukraine and Asharshilik of Kazakhstan. However, the murder of Kirov and later attribution to this xenovivist plot provided Stalin with the justification to target not just external enemies, but the Communist Party itself, marking the onset of the infamous Moscow trials. Meticulously orchestrated, these trials were not only a tool to eliminate perceived threats, but also served as a stage for Stalin to broadcast his power and the consequence of opposing his rule. Defendants were subject to psychological and physical coercion to extract confessions, often in absurd and unbelievable scenarios. The first of the Moscow trials in August 1936 set a precedent for the theatrical nature of these proceedings, focused on the creatively named Case of the Trotskayet Zinovivite Terrorist Center. Among these defendants were Lev Kamenev and Grigory Zinoviev. Once known as prominent figures in the Bolshevik Revolution and close associates of Lenin, they were now cast as traitors in a fabricated narrative. Their confessions, likely extracted under duress, were part of a choreographed spectacle designed to validate Stalin's purges to the public and the international community. The trial's outcome, predetermined, culminated in their execution. January 1937 saw a second trial focusing on the so-called anti-Soviet Trotskayet Center. Karl Radek, Yuri Pyatakov, and Grigory Sokolnikov, along with 14 others, were accused of conspiring with Trotsky and foreign powers. These charges were far-fetched, alleging espionage, sabotage, and even collaboration with Nazi Germany, a nation increasingly seen as the mortal enemy to the Soviet Union. The conviction and execution of these individuals, some of whom were lesser known but still vital within the party, underlined the pervasive reach of Stalin's paranoia. The climax of these show trials came in March 1938 with the Bloc of Rightists and Trotskyists, involving prominent figures like Nikoli Bukharin, Alexei Rykov, and Genrik Yagoda. This trial was especially significant due to the involvement of Bukharin, a noted theorist and a key figure in the Bolshevik Revolution. The charges were increasingly fantastical, with accusations of long-term conspiracies dating back to the early stages of the Soviet Union. The confessions, often contradictory and nonsensical, were made in a desperate bid for survival. Observers, even those sympathetic to the Soviet government, doubted these allegations. Stalin's repression widened, targeting various societal sectors. His secret directive on July 2, 1937, mandated mass arrests of kulaks, criminals, and anti-Soviet elements, with NKVD Order No. 00447 further intensifying actions against ex-kulaks and other groups. A mix of pre-existing surveillance lists and random arrests fueled this purge. Common criminals, engineers, and even ordinary workers became ensnared in a brutal campaign marked by fabricated charges, summary executions, and widespread fear sweeping across the USSR with an unprecedented ferocity. Many arrests were arbitrary, based on denunciations or associations with the arrested. Workers near strategic sites were falsely accused of sabotage. The Orthodox clergy faced massive arrests, and special settlers under surveillance were also targeted. The NKVD, aided by police and party members, enforced mass arrests, often using torture for forced confessions. NKVD troikas issued quick verdicts without trial, resulting in immediate executions or gulag sentences. The Kulak operation was the largest campaign, with over 669,000 arrests and 776,000 executions. Besides the repression of regular Soviet citizens, the Purge notably targeted specific ethnic minorities, with the NKVD Polish operation of 1937 to 1938 being one of the most severe. Records indicate over 143,000 arrests and 111,000 executions within the Soviet Union, of which at least 85,000 were ethnic Poles. This was a targeted campaign against Poles living in the Soviet Union, who constituted only 0.4% of the population, yet accounted for 12.5% of the Purge's victims. The wider repercussions were far-reaching. As families of those executed suffered immensely, NKVD Order No. 00486 mandated forced labor for the wives of the accused and the institutionalization of their children, leaving extended Polish families destitute and vulnerable, affecting up to 250,000 people. Beyond the NKVD Polish operation, other ethnic minorities, such as Finns, Bulgarians, Iranians, and even the Chinese, bore a disproportionate brunt of the Purge, with 36% of the victims belonging to these groups, despite comprising only 1.6% of the Soviet population. This brutal campaign, while ostensibly aimed at rooting out counter-revolutionaries, often used arbitrary methods of the album procedure for selecting victims, highlighting a tragic blend of bureaucratic pedantry and ethnic cleansing. Arguably the most detrimental stage of Stalin's Great Sweep came in the Red Army Purge, which decimated its ranks, eliminating a huge swath of the general staff and officers, along with many army and corps commissars. Initially, it was believed that 25 to 50% of officers were purged. However, the actual figure was between 4 and 8% due to underestimations of the army's size and many officers being expelled from the party rather than dismissed. About 30% of those purged were later reinstated. The purge was partly justified by supposedly German-forged documents linking Marshal Mikhail Tukhachevsky with the German High Command, a claim later proven to be factually unsupported. Most evidence used in the trials came from forced confessions. This significant weakening of the Red Army's leadership influenced Germany's future war decisions, with Hitler citing the purge as a reason to underestimate the army's effectiveness, countering the opposition of many of his generals to an invasion of Russia. The Great Purge reshaped Soviet politics and society, drawing global attention and impacting foreign relations, especially with the West. This period entrenched a fear-based authoritarian regime. After Stalin's death, a significant change unfolded, as Khrushchev's de-Stalinization phase critically reassessed and condemned the purge's excesses.